Welcome, everyone. We've got some pretty distinguished guests on our screen tonight. I'm so excited about this discussion as we continue on our unmuted series, The Bible and Gender. Up in the left, we have my lovely wife, Ruby Mitchell, alongside with Audrey Sturgeon, Kim Evans, Latasha Tucker, Dr. Robin Meadows, and then we also have Dolores Howery. We have just an incredible cast of individuals tonight that will be discussing Bible and gender. And I know that we've done many different talks on this. We've had a month to study texts and scriptures on this. We've encouraged you to read the book that the teachers have put out. If you haven't been able to do that, I encourage you over the holiday break, if you get some extra time, to likewise do that. But tonight we've chosen these women. My wife and I, we serve as evangelists and women's ministry leader here in the Philadelphia church. And God has called us to set the vision and to really lead the evangelistic charge for the church and to raise up leaders. But one of the important tasks that God has given us as evangelists and women's ministry leader is appointing elders and their wives. And tonight, I've asked for all of our elders' wives, along with my wife, to share different perspectives on the subject of Bible and gender. And you may say, well, why are these women chosen to share? We could, why not pick other people? Why these women? Well, the Bible in 1 Timothy chapter 3, you begin reading there in verse 1, and Paul is writing to Timothy, but he's making it clear about the role of elder. And he writes here in verse 1, he says, "Here is a trustworthy saying. Whoever aspires to be an overseer desires a noble task. Now the overseer is to be above reproach, faithful to his wife, temperate, self-controlled, respectable, hospitable, able to teach, not given to drunkenness, not violent, but gentle, not quarrelsome, not a lover of money. He must manage his own family well and see that his children obey him. And he must do so in a manner worthy of full respect. If anyone does not know how to manage his own family, how can he take care of God's church?" The Bible is very clear on its role of an elder and the elder's wife. And God holds out some pretty high standards. One, blameless, a blameless steward of God, faithful in marriage, temperate, sober, vigilant, sober-minded, and prudent. Good behavior, right? Respectable both in the church and outside the church. And then it talks about the family and the children. And this is one of these qualifications that you just can't show up in the church and be appointed. It takes longevity. It takes time. It takes maturity. It takes watching the outcome of the way of their life before being appointed as an overseer. And we know that this role that God has laid out for an elder works hand in hand with the wives. For without the wife, this is an impossible task for any male to achieve. And God says something pretty interesting here in verse 5. He says, if anyone does not know how to manage his own family, they cannot manage or oversee the church. And so what God is saying about the elder and his wife is that this is the example. This is the way, the outcome of the way of life, the decisions, the actions that they took, the faith and convictions that they have. These are the convictions and the faith that I want to oversee my family. And you can't hide behind talent. You can't hide behind education or certain gifts to really live a life that this Bible has talked about with regards to the elder and their family. You can't hide. It is on display. And in addition to that, there's a time of testing where they are brought before the congregation to be evaluated. So there's high standards from God and high standards from the membership, the family. And so God says, once they meet that, these are the individuals I want to oversee. So from a female perspective, it would really only behoove us that we have these women sharing their perspective on many different subject matters with regards to the Bible and gender. For God is saying that this, because of the outcome of the way of their life, this now is the standard that I want my church governed. And so these women that I bring before you tonight, that my wife and I bring before you, are worthy of great respect. Not because they're showboating, not because they beat their own drum, but the outcome of the way of their life and their faith has proven to be what God expects of his church. So their thinking, their input, their faith is invaluable for us as a congregation. And so I'm honored to MC tonight's discussion with these women. And I so am honored that God has blessed your life in such a way that the Philadelphia church could really be edified, moved, and inspired by your faith and by your life. So as an introduction, if you could all, I know we've got so many folks on right now that probably maybe haven't even met you. So if we could start with the top left with my wife, if you can just introduce yourself, how many years you've been a disciple, or when you were baptized, and where did you become a disciple? And currently, where do you worship in Philly?
Okay, my name is Ruby Mitchell, and I have been a disciple here for 35 years. I was converted in New York City and the borough of Queens. And as a single woman, studied the Bible at 25. I've been in the church here for almost, anyways, do the math. It's been a while, but it's great because I came in as a single woman and gotten married, been married for 25 years. The region that I worship in is the Chestnut Hill United. So there you go.
Awesome. Audrey?
I am Audrey. I was converted as a result of New York planting Philadelphia. I became a Christian at University of Pennsylvania in my third year as a nursing student. I was, I believe, the first Jewish convert in the church. So
That's a pretty big deal.
it was very encouraging. The church was like, well, a Jewish person. Anyway, that's a different story. I've been a disciple for 32 years. Been in Philly. I grew up in Philadelphia in the Northeast. So I am native, and married Randy and have 3 kids, and we worship in the Havertown region.
Awesome. Awesome. Great to have you, Audrey and Ruby. Kim Evans. You're muted.
I'm Kim Evans, and I have been a Christian 42 years. That's crazy. I became a Christian in Gainesville, Florida at 19 years old, and I'm in the North. So
That's awesome. Awesome. Latasha Tucker.
Hello, everyone. Again, I'm Latasha Tucker. I've been a disciple for 31 years. I became a Christian at 15 years old in the Bronx Teen Ministry in New York. I am married to Ryan Tucker. We have 2 daughters, Amaya, who's 21, and Olivia, who's 16. And currently, we worship in the Havertown region of the Philadelphia Church of Christ.
Awesome. Great to have you, Latasha. Great to have you. Dr. Robin Meadows.
So my name is Robin Meadows, and I've been a disciple now for about 31 years. Converted in the Philadelphia church, and then I was whisked away, and I was in Maryland for about a year. Was a part of the DC ministry, then came back, started dating, and then I've been married. We'll be married 30 years in October. 2 children. My son is 26. He's married. Everybody grew up in the Philadelphia church, and my daughter, Sydney, she's a senior in college, and I'm a practicing OBGYN, and I'm part of the New Jersey region. So with here in New Jersey.
Well, it's great to have you, Dr. Robin Meadows. It's awesome. Dolores Howery.
Hello, everyone. I'm Dolores Howery. I've been a disciple 29 years. I was converted in Philly and haven't left since. I have 2 daughters, Rachel and Juliana, 25 and 22, and my husband, David, serves as an elder in the North region.
Awesome. Awesome. It's great to have you. So, I mean, brothers and sisters, when you hear how long these women have been disciples, I mean, we've got like maybe 200 years of wisdom and experience on the call tonight. And I'm so excited because I have never been a part of a fellowship meeting where such talented women are all speaking at once. So that is just awesome in every way. And so I'm so thankful for you, and I feel blessed to do this. So we're going to jump right on into this. And as you ladies know, we've been studying out the Bible and gender, and we've talked about a number of things, and we've dove into biblical context. We've talked about the task force that was put together. We've had Ayanna, Dr. Perkins share. I mean, it's just been great. And, you know, tonight, I just thought we start off with maybe, you know, obviously you guys have been around for a while in the fellowship. You're very well connected to many people. I would love for you to share, what feedback do you hear from women with regards to how at times they have been made to feel in our fellowship? And I know that, you know, things like this sometimes can get tricky. You can feel, you know, kind of down, or man, that's negative, but it's a reality. And I think it's a good exercise for us to hear. So I'd love for you to jump on in and share what you've heard from different women in regards to how they've been made to feel.
I'll start. These aren't the only feelings. I do want to say there's many that are grateful or whatever, but we've been asked to share about some of the hurts or struggles or those kind of things. But I think even the phrasing, sometimes we just have to learn how to say things in a way to help the women feel valued. So saying things like, I'm now going to let my wife share, that kind of thing, or I'm going to let this sister share, or sometimes as boldly as in fellowship, sisters hearing from brothers, you need to submit.
Ooh.
You know, that submission is a voluntary thing when it's said like that, or feeling at times like, yeah, I'm the token sister in the worship service or whatever. Not that my spiritual convictions or understandings are that there's a place for me to share those things at times. And I think in contrast to how they're valued sometimes in the world, it's hard when you come in and you don't feel valued in the church in the same way, or not knowing how to use your talents in the church, that kind of thing.
Thank you, Kim. Thank you. Tyler? Audrey, go ahead.
I think along the same lines, I've heard similar things. You know, I've heard from some women who feel like they have to carry the load, whether it be carrying a load at home or carrying a load, you know, at work, and feeling unappreciated, and feeling, not recognized and not appreciated and just feeling tired. And, I've also, spoken to women who, they're very skilled, and they have positions of authority, and they feel highly valued and highly regarded outside of the church. And sometimes within the church, they feel minimalized and they feel like not appreciated and feel like, okay, because I'm a sister and not necessarily a brother, even the skills that I bring to the table somehow seem diminished.
Mhm. Mhm. Wow. Thanks, Tosh. Thank you. Thank you.
Again, sisters love our brothers, and but there has been expressions of frustration sometimes with single women who co-lead with some brothers, and stories of, okay, the plan, like the Bible talk could be configured in a way that is very much women dominant, but the brother will come in and say, this is the plan for the upcoming year, without getting weigh in from the sister that's co-leading, or it just feels they don't feel valued, that their thoughts, their opinions, their insight into how to be utilized or what direction to go. So things like that. I've some of the married sisters have shared at times that they have, kind of like what Tosh was sharing, that they have talents and skills, but sometimes it communicates an upstaging of if they use those skills and it's not their spouses, sometimes the spouse has shared, maybe feeling like a little upstaged, so feeling restricted to use that, so having to work through stuff like that.
No, that's great. Hey, that's great, Audrey. Thank you.
Yeah,
Were you going
I've
to say
also,
something? Oh, okay.
yeah, I was gonna say that I've also heard some women who have felt like in trying to express themselves, they're too emotional and that they need to toughen up, or that they're not listening to, they're not being heard. That women bring a unique perspective, and they've been met with resistance.
Wow. How do you ladies think, first of all, I appreciate the honesty, the candid responses. How do you, when you hear that, right? And as a male, what do you think? Just one, how do we respond? Like, how do we, because obviously you can feel as a guy, okay, I'm not saying anything now. Whoa, what do you think helps to bridge that gap? Because obviously that's a gap. Like for me, I have, the first time I heard that, this phrase, oh, at this time I'm going to let my wife share, that was just like a punch in the gut. Like I had no idea the effects of that phrase. Like I just never thought about it. And that's my ignorance, insensitivity, many things. But how do we bridge that gap? Because if there's so many different things that people are feeling, how do we bridge that as men and women?
I think, Chip, this is a great venue. I think just the idea of you saying that, clearly it will resonate with other people that may have had that experience. I think it's also important for people in the church to understand that when the leadership team gets together, we as the wives are there, our voice matters. The decisions that are made for the church are not made in such a vacuum that we don't bring the input of women. We are ground troops. We hear a lot of the things front line. So, when a lot of these leadership decisions are being made, they absolutely have heard of some of the women's concerns. So I think just this type of venue, this type of forum is really great. It gives everybody an idea to realize that there really are women who are on that leadership team who have some input.
I think too, Jesus's example on the cross where he says, forgive them, they know not what they do. Like the fact that we can give voice to it, but not be critical, like hearing you say, wow, I didn't know that how he made you feel. Like even going through race talks or going through gender, we're all learning. And, but yet while we're learning, we have to forgive each other.
Yeah.
Yes.
We have to give voice to it and then say, I totally forgive you. I just want you to know how this makes me feel.
Mhm.
And it's not emotionally charged. And it's not that I'm going to carry it around after. But I'm just proud of us as a church to have these discussions in a non-emotional way.
Mhm.
No, I appreciate that, Kim and Robin. I mean, it's funny. So in my relationship with my wife, Ruby, you know, we have our things. We have our disposition, our interactions, and they work for us. But I know I have to realize that I don't have that relationship with anybody else but Ruby. And what I may be very comfortable and easy in our relationship is not necessarily heard in the same venue. And, you know, my biggest fear is just getting scared to say anything, but I appreciate the idea of a venue like this to talk. I appreciate the grace being extended. And I think for men, it's just, you know, I love the passage. Every time I marry someone, I say, you know, to the male, God created someone to help you. And if you need help in math, you don't go to someone who's not better than you. You know, and realizing that my wife was here to help me because I'm incapable of accomplishing what God wanted without my wife. That always helps me. And I think that's so indicative of the fellowship, right? That we need each other. So awesome. I can move on to the next question if that's okay. Awesome. So, you know, I was thinking about this, and, you know, so many times we read, you know, Hebrews, right? Hebrews, you know, we get into Hebrews chapter 5, or Ephesians chapter 5. And the Bible talks about the husband and wife relationship, this submission thing. And sometimes this stuff gets so testy from the cultures that we live in. But I just thought it'd be powerful. When you read Ephesians chapter 5, beginning in verse 21, it says, submit to one another out of reverence for Christ. And then it says in verse 22, wives, submit to your husband, or submit yourselves to your own husbands as you do to the Lord. For the husband is the head of the wife, as Christ is the head of the church, his body, of which he is the Savior. Now, as the church submits to Christ, so also wives should submit to their husbands in everything. You know, you read this passage, I'm curious, you know, the Bible speaks of your family and your life as a model for the church. How have you taken these biblical principles and exercised your faith as a woman, as a wife, as a mother?
One of the things I think about is verse 22. It's saying wives submit. And, you know, I really appreciate that God calls me to do that. It's I think Kim touched on this, it's voluntary. And it's part of my walk in faith with God, my trust in God that he's in control, even despite the circumstances that are before my eyes. And if I trust in God, this is me and God walking, and I submit to who he put as a head for order, we're going to be okay. And I think that, you know, on the flip side, you know, where it talks about husbands, love your wives, that's for the men to do. Like, and it doesn't do me well to tell Randy how to walk his faith. And it doesn't do him well to tell me how to walk mine, you know? And so I think we got to let each other walk our faith and give us each space to grow in it.
Yeah. Yeah,
But
too.
wait, Audrey, are you saying submit like, hey, whatever Randy wants to do, just do it. I'm on board. Like, is that what you're saying?
So, no. Yes and no. I think that God is asking me to allow my husband to lead our family.
Mm.
And that we've got to get to a place. And when I am being a faithful woman, if there is a point where Randy and I don't come to an agreement, I have to rest in faith that God put him there as an authority and to make the final decision. So yes, I think I need to let go of my opinion. And we've gotten help, like you need help along the way. Like it's not easy to do, right? It's like when the rubber meets the road, sparks are flying. We're sitting on Zoom with the Evans or you or whatever, trying to figure this out. But if I love God and I want to honor God with my life, I'm going to follow that because that's my expression of faith to God.
Wow.
Is in doing
Yeah.
that. I do
Wow,
think
Kim.
that-
Wow.
Yeah, I think that we've misunderstood submission and authority. Like, I think God's a God of order. The sun comes up at a certain time, it goes down, seasons come the same time. Life has order to it. And because there's authority doesn't mean that one person's better than the other. In God's eyes, he values us all the same. We just have different roles. It's not that one's better than the other, anything, but it's interesting all through the Bible, when God says, children, obey your parents, it goes better for kids when they obey their parents. Like it does. We know that. And the parents and their kids get respect and freedom, and they get all sorts of stuff they want when they do that. But God doesn't say, obey your parents and these things will happen. When God says, wives, submit to your husband, what I've learned, Walter and I are coming up on 39 years of marriage next year. And when I through the year, I wish I knew this when I first got married. When I submit to Walter, he asked me what I think. Now, when I come in combative or bossy or whatever, the dialogue never goes well. But if I submit, and God doesn't say, wives, submit to your husbands, and then they're gonna engage your conversations, or they're gonna say, what do you think? Or what do you, and God's ways just work. And it's not it's not the same as your career and coming up the corporate ladder or doing it at home. It's not that. And we can't compare them. But I just think that it just works. And it also helps with our kids. When somebody's making a decision, it helps them to understand that in life, that it just works better.
Wow. Dr. Meadows.
Yeah, so as in business, as in any corporate situation, there always has to be a leader. There has to be one person who's going to make the final decision. A team, you have to have a team leader, and good support role, makes the entire team look good. So I don't have any problem letting Anthony lead, because one, God put us together, but he's a good man. He's a godly man. He's somebody who I trust. I have a lot of faith in. And the idea that scripture goes on, people like to stop at that passage of wives submit. But when you really read the entire passage, husbands, love your wives just as Christ loved the church. He gave himself up for her. This is for women, like, you can have that role. You got men, take it. You're in front. And I'm not afraid of that. I tell people all the time, I make decisions all day at work. So by the time I come home at night, I'm fine with not even deciding what we're having for dinner. So it's okay. I can leave that alone.
Yeah.
That's an interesting thought. Yes, Tosh, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, for me personally, I love verse 21 as well. For me, it's key, where it says, submit to one another out of reverence for Christ. For me, I try and always remember, why do we do the things that we do? And it's out of reverence for Christ that we do it, not because our spouses deserve it or are so great, or not that we deserve it and we're so great. It really takes us out of the equation, and it becomes which it should be, about God and about Christ. We do these things out of reverence for Christ. And so when I can get in that mindset, it helps me, when I'm not doing the best and I'm nitpicky about things. I have to remember I'm not perfect. My spouse is not perfect, but it's not about us. It's about God. And I think a lot of times I have to take myself out of the equation and remember everything that I do in reverence for Christ, because when I said Jesus is Lord, that's what it meant. Jesus is Lord of my life, no longer me, but my life belongs to Christ.
Fantastic. It's what you're sharing is like golden, and I'm keeping this recording and I'm going to sell it. And then we're going to make missions from this, because this is awesome stuff you guys are sharing. I mean, but a couple things I want to touch on. We are going to get to how does this apply to a single mom in a home. We are going to talk about that. But before we do that, one of the things you said, Dr. Meadows, is, you're submitting to this spiritual individual. How do you all think that plays into romance and dating? Like, is that something we should be considering when you're thinking of choosing someone to date or choosing someone to marry? How does that play into this idea of this partnership that God is calling you into with these two different roles?
There's a lot of dating websites. There's a lot of places that people go to look for a partner. And, it's really kind of scary if you're thinking about somebody who doesn't have this reverence and respect for God as the leader. You have to have a fear of God to make right decisions. And so this person who may be a fancy dresser, who may have a lot of money, fancy car, but may not respect you. And so that's a big deal. That's a red flag. That's an early warning sign. So to choosing a life partner, the marriage is a covenant. It's not just a marriage certificate. It's this bond that you're bound to this person forever in on a heavenly realm. You want to be bound to someone who really has a fear of God. And if you don't, look around. The marriages in the world just don't make it. So God really designated marriages to be forever. He has a blueprint for how that's done. And the scriptures are real clear on how to make it happen. So you just have to submit to God's word. And frankly, a lot of times, if you're in fear, it's not your lack of faith in your husband, it's your lack of faith in God. You're not really trusting God. So it's an important concept.
Yeah. That's a good point.
Wow. So what do you do if you're in a marriage and maybe your spouse is not a Christian, or is just a terrible Christian, and you have insights into God and faith, and they're nowhere near there, and they're grumpy, they're surly. Ruby always tells me about the surly man, in the Bible. He was surly. And, how do we deal with that? Do we just go, well, take control now, let me fix this, and then once we get on better ground, what do you do with that?
I'll speak to the surly man. No, I'm just kidding. But to that subject, I think what happens in marriage, and when it comes to, we've been talking about submission, and Sarah, it said about Sarah that she did not fear. And that's what allowed her to submit to Abraham. And Abraham did some really funky things that today we'd be offended by. And yet, again, it was her trust in God that allowed her to stay the course, not put down her husband or look down on her husband. We also have an example of Vashti in the Old Testament, where she was just kind of right up there with her husband. She didn't show the headship or the respect for him. And we see where that led her. I think God has given us some great examples for us as women, that when we don't take this approach and we try to get our own way and we force things, it doesn't turn out right. And we've got examples around us, whether it be in or out of the church, but also in the Bible, where it shows us what being a woman who fears God and does not fear necessarily our position, but that we fear God more and that we trust in him, that even if this marriage or if this person is not, kind, or if he is surly, that the Bible, that same scripture says like he can be won over by our actions, not necessarily by what we say. But that takes a really deep relationship with God and a great faith to do that.
Wow,
I think
awesome.
too,
Kim?
we have examples in the church like Ethel. Ethel was a Christian, I think 11 years before Willie became a Christian.
Mhm,
And they're an amazing couple now, and that's 11 years is a long time.
mhm.
And, but the fact that we have women that are walking in those shoes that we can go to and talk to, and is really what a blessing we have in the church.
Amen.
And who knows how it'll come out, and winning our husbands over by the Bible talks about our example, but not with many words.
Right.
Those kind of things.
Let me ask you this question. So obviously, verse 22 and following is talking about the marriage relationships. Verse 21 is talking about just the body. So when you think of singles, how does that work in a male and a female that are not married, but in the fellowship? How do you think verse 21 really applies? Is that where the guy sometimes just said, hey, you just need to submit and listen? How does that work? What is God's intention there? And I'm sure you guys, obviously raising your kids, seeing the daughters and the sons and their interactions, I'm sure you've learned a great wealth of knowledge.
I don't think that submission, I think any of us, if we use the word, you should submit to me, we've lost the ball game. It's a voluntary directive from God to me, not from someone else to hold it over me. I think as training each other, someone may say in discipling with each other in a relationship that's not them, like, you ought to think about submitting to one another out of reverence for Christ or whatever, like in that way. But I just think that it's totally misuse of the word.
Love that, Kim. Love it. Yes, Latasha?
Chip, I think, I know for me, when I hear those things, and even in my own life, I think sometimes we just, we need to have mutual respect for one another. No matter what station we're in, or no matter who we are, we need to have mutual respect. And we also need to have humility and realize that none of us have arrived. We all have our own faults. We all have things that we are continuing to grow and learn in. And I think if we approach anything with humility, knowing that, okay, there's always something I can learn, even if it's learning what not to do, you can still learn. And then just mutual respect for one another. I think in the world, we've lost that. I think sometimes in the kingdom, we can bring the world in and we don't have the mutual respect for one another. We forget to be kind to one another. We forget just the little things. And I think that goes a long way.
Wow, that was incredible. What advice or encouragement do you have for single parents, single moms in particular? I know that there are some single dads, but when you think about this passage and it's talking about the head of the house and so forth, what encouragement and advice do you have to single moms?
I think of some of the single moms who are really just some heroes in the faith. I mean, for these women to be playing a role of a mother and a father and still find a way to bring their child to church and, to work and pay the bills and, just to really be on top of things. It sometimes is a challenge. So for them to stay faithful is a great testament to their walk with God. But I think that they can, by them not being married, they are head of their own household, but they can incorporate brothers into their life especially if they have children. So for those women who have children, you sometimes may need to incorporate some of the brothers to help you with your sons, finding some one-on-one times with them to do that. Some women may have trouble with certain like budgeting things. They might need a brother who may be good in accounting to help them with budget or some repairs, and I don't mean to be gender, because I was the one who bought the drill in my household, but, just different things they might need in the house to have repairs, can solicit some of the brothers to help out. So there are ways to incorporate, some of the male inputs. But while they are single, they really are in charge of their households. And many of these women are just doing a phenomenal job.
Wow.
I think too, I think many people don't realize, but I was raised in the church, and my mom married Bob Gemple, my dad, when I was in 5th grade, and my mom was a single mom. But one of the things that she did just profoundly, is she never, ever, ever said anything against my real dad. And we were in contact with him. We'd see him at that point in our life, and we had a relationship with him. And I just think that that's a really amazing example.
Mhm.
And, she was a disciple, and it's just, Satan will always tempt you to cut down the other parent. And I just think how that served me really well. She didn't do that, and that's always a temptation.
Wow, that's awesome, Kim. There's so much to talk about. We can go on for hours, but we just can't. I want to ask some specific questions. So Audrey, this first question is coming to you. Now, I know your family, I know your life. Both you and your husband have brilliant minds. You two are so intelligent. You're brilliant. You're incredibly wise. You're passionate about education and life and science. When you put those two minds together, how does that work with these two incredible minds in a marriage? And when you think of male and female roles, how do you do it? What are some of the challenges, and how do you overcome it?
Well, for one thing, Randy and I have very strong opinions. But I have to say, Randy is a very humble guy, and he really wants to know what I think. And that really helps me. I think I'm probably more the prideful one out of the two. I know that. I don't think I am. I've had to learn a lot from his humble approach, how to, be less quick to come to my opinion and ask more questions. So he's definitely helped me with that. I think for me, when I'm passionate about something, that's where things go awry. And I've had to learn, like, okay, take a breath and, ask questions and, not just think about my own position, but really what's best, and really let him, I think that I'm a quicker decision maker and Randy's more pensive. And that really has served our family well. Those two, you would think, how can both of those things in the same room be good? But it has served our family well when we respect each other and appreciate what the other person is bringing into this equation. It's not, and I know I'm not doing well if I'm thinking negative or critically about that. Like, I'm not in a good space. So when we're both like, no, you need to dwell and think, and I get the ball moving down the court, we help each other, and it complements each other. It builds up the family. But wow. I've really had to grow being respectful, like learning what respect looks like. And I think, Randy's more emotional, I think, in some places than I am. And so, learning how to make sure I have good communication and making sure I don't overstep, and I don't offend. So these have been really helpful for me.
Now, when you say Randy's humble, what do you mean? Like, what are some examples? You mean humble with you, or what is?
I think he's humble with everybody, honestly. But yes, like he'll always say, like, honey, what do you think? What do you, It's always, what do I want to do?
Mhm.
And in fact, when he gets with couples where there's this issue with the brother and the sister, and the brother's feeling like wife needs to be more submissive, I always hear him say, bro, if you have to use the word submissive in a sentence, like, you've lost that, like, that is wrong. Like, that should never be the foot we lead with. Like, your wife should want to submit to you. And he's always been about, like, I want to make it easy for you to do your role. Like, my job is to make your job easier. And I really appreciate that, because I feel valued. I feel important. I
Wait,
feel like,
can we mute you, because we're going to all be in trouble as husbands.
We're getting a t-shirt. that
That's
says-
awesome.
That's awesome, Audrey. I really respect that. It really says a lot about your marriage, your faith, and your husband. That really is amazing. My next question is to Dolores. Dolores, you work in a very high-powered corporate world, which is dominated by many men, and you lead a team of men, and you are incredibly gifted at what you do in corporate America, and you've got a lane there, and you're doing a fabulous job, and then you come on over into the kingdom, and are there challenges? Do you have a lane? How do you balance the two?
Yeah, that's a good question. Like you said, I do lead a team of men, some who are younger than me, some who are older than me. So that's been a challenge to kind of balance that. But I've always approached my position in management as doing everything in my power to make my team the best that they can be. So if that's removing a roadblock or providing some other thing that they're lacking, that they need help with, that's always been my goal. I'm very much in the trenches with everyone. And I respect the people that work for me tremendously, because I know that they're incredibly important. And what I have found is that when people know that you care about them, they'll bend over backwards for you. And there's that saying, people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care.
Yeah.
And I think, what is that? That's discipleship, really.
Wow.
It's kind of the same thing. And so when I am at work, I put my whole mind on what the task is ahead of me. And that's kind of the same thing in the church, that what my role is as an elder's wife is to support the church and the women in my region and wherever I am called to, wherever the need is, to help remove, spiritual roadblocks, to provide anything that is, supporting anything like that. I mean, it pretty much is a mirror to kind of what I do in the corporate world. And, when I look back at things, like, I don't feel like I have to be out front to have value. My value.
Now, what do you mean by that?
Well, my value comes from the success of my team, not my own kudos. Like, when I go and approach a task, I always look at like 4 things, 4 A's, I'll say. Like, number 1, do I have the ability to take on this task? Number 2, do I have the authority to execute it? And number 3, am I ready to accept the accountability of the outcome of this task? And, I approach everything like that, in that it's, sorry, am I still there?
Yeah.
Okay, my battery's about to die, sorry. Yeah, I'm just very sober about where I'm at, my abilities, and how I can help other people. And if I can't do it, I'll find someone that can help me help someone.
Okay, Dolores, you got to give us those 4 A's again, because everybody is trying to write them down and they got lost. Can you say that again?
Yeah, number 1, do you have the ability? Number 2, do you have the authority? And number 3, are you ready to accept the accountability?
Wow.
2 A's together, accept accountability.
Yeah.
Here it is.
2
Wow.
A's together. Yeah. You know, I mean, ultimately it comes to what's my motivation? What's the why behind anything I do?
Yeah.
And that goes for whether it's at work or whether it's in the church. You know, is my goal to make the church the radiant bride of Christ?
Mhm.
That's the ultimate goal.
Well said.
Wow. Wow. Said. I mean, listen, no one write this stuff down because I'm writing a book and I'm going to get it all copyrighted. So this is fantastic. Well, my next guest is this CEO of a multi-million-dollar corporation that spans its influence and works with male leaders, church leaders from Cincinnati all the way down to Kentucky, works with young and old men, and does a fantastic job as Chief Executive Officer for Hope for Kids. My guest is Kim Evans. Kim, all I want to know, and all our listeners want to know, is how in the world do you do it? And what are some of the challenges you face? How do you do it?
I have no idea. So none whatsoever. Chip asked me this question the first time on Sunday. I'm like, first I got teary-eyed by his introduction, and secondly, I have no idea. But I do think it goes along with what Dolores is saying.
Mhm.
It has nothing to do with me. It has something to do with seeing the need in kids to develop faith. And that's where it came from, and that's where it started. And it started that we came here in the church, and the church was 200 people. And I realized that not one of the kids in the middle school or high school ministry wanted to become a Christian, not one. And we were raising our kids, and I got my faith in the church at camp and trying to think, what are we going to do? What are we going to do? And we started, and it was just 40 kids. That's when it started. So it came from seeing a need and meeting the need. And then as we figured out that those that were serving it met the need, we were growing as volunteers. And then we realized, well, if this is going so great in the church, what about the kids that don't have this opportunity? What about the inner city kids? Let's add them, and let's add that. But it was at each step only because of seeing a need, not building a name for me.
Yeah, but wait, Kim. Oh, okay, but you're a woman.
I am.
Yes. And well, how did you navigate that with so many male leaders, evangelists, elders, different churches? How did you navigate and find your lane? Because I've heard from women, where's my lane? I can't get my lane. Where do I get the place of influence? How'd you do it?
So what I've said for many years to many of the women, and the women young and old, when the evangelists come in, I said, I don't know how many of you watch Pinocchio, but see yourself as Jiminy Cricket. Like, again, what Dolores was saying, if the goal is, man, we want to instill faith in kids, and not everybody has the same passion for that mission that I have. But the evangelists are willing to come and give a week at camp, which is totally awesome. And there's nobody that can do it like the evangelists can. And the kids need to see the evangelists or the elders or whatever, and have that relationship. And so I'm like, if you with great respect will be what Jiminy Cricket does in Pinocchio, goes over and whispers, you should do this, or you should do that, or you should do. If you're the great support and you're there, they want to know the help. They want to know. They want the help. They want the input. They take, it's just, it works great. And they're very appreciative of the input. Where women get tangled up is when the focus is on ourselves rather than what's the mission. The mission is instilling faith in kids and building community in the church.
Yeah.
And when it's on that and not on ourselves, it works just fine. Last year, we had to all, at the beginning with camp staff, we had to go around and give one word that described us for the 3 months we were going to be at camp. So it got to me and I said, what's my word? I said, forklift. People said, why forklift? And I said, because my goal here is to help all of you do a great job. It doesn't matter if you're women doing your job or men doing your job. And I think the other key to all of this is Walter is wildly supportive. Now, I could be critical because he doesn't spend the time at camp that I do, or this or that, or, we could get back and forth, but he totally supports me in doing this. And that makes a huge difference. Absolutely a huge difference. And the eldership in Philly supports it. So, and the staff rallies behind it. But we have to get our eyes off of ourselves for that to happen.
That's just awesome. Well said.
Yeah.
So this next guest that I have, I mean, it's the most incredible woman I've ever met in my life. Just absolutely outstanding in every way, physically, mentally, spiritually. She's just amazing. She is my Mona Lisa, Ruby. But Ruby was alive before me.
No.
And she had a life before me. And at one time, Ruby, you were in the ministry here in Philadelphia as a single woman, leading with two men that are on this call tonight. Dave Woods, you led with him in the ministry. Also, you led with Will Workman. He was a single guy. These are two very passionate men of God with deep convictions. And you were a single woman in the ministry, leading with them. At one time, I think you and Will led a sector that had married, single, some older, some younger. Ruby, how did you find your voice?
Chip, I spoke about this when we did our dating devotional, that I had a problem with men being younger than me. And wouldn't you know that God would put me in the ministry with men that was 11 years older than, and we were all interns. It started out, it was a little rough, I would say, with Will, he would probably say that. But what I realized, and what we both realized in working together, it was just the submission. And I learned how to submit to Will, and I worked directly with Will, but to submit to his leadership. And he was learning as I was learning, but I came in with a pride of being older, but God just humbled, and I just got to a place where I was able to love Will Workman, who he was, for what he was, and we worked really well together in the end. We definitely had to work at it, but I think the thing that was true that I've been hearing throughout the night is the submitting, putting yourself under, not someone telling you must submit, but that was something that I laid it down so I could lead with him alongside Will in that way. And we had a great working relationship. Those were great days.
Well, I mean, honey, I tell you, I really respect it. I mean, someone 11 years younger, that's a big deal. And I want to thank Dave and Will for training my wife, because she's awesome. My next guest is just brilliant in every way, a phenomenal servant, and has overcome cancer and has gone through it and has just been spectacular in her faith throughout it all. And that's Latasha Tucker. And Tosh, I know that obviously you've been through a lot in your own personal life, but I would love to hear your perspective on the feedback you received on folks needing to be trained, but also how do you deal with our different family experiences when we come into church later. We may not have grown up. We got these different family experiences. How does that play into these gender roles? And what do we need to be careful of?
Yeah, I know personally for Ryan and I, it was so important to have mentors and have people in our life when we were dating, but also throughout our life, you know, when we were young marrieds and when we were married with kids and, you know, teenagers and even now. And it's so important because we all come from different backgrounds. You know, some of us may have grown up seeing great or good marriages, and some of us may have grown up not seeing such great marriages. Some of us may not have seen marriages at all. So it's really important, and especially for us, you know, and for everyone, when you get married, you become one. And I always think, you know, God has entrusted us to each other, which means that I'm responsible for taking care of him. He's responsible for taking care of me. And the goal is for each of us to get one another to heaven. And then you throw in kids, and that's another group that God has given us and entrusted us with, so that we can one day give them back to God. And the Bible is full of just, you know, scriptures about being trained. You know, 1 Timothy 4:7 talks about train yourself to be godly. And Luke 6:39-40, Jesus says, can the blind lead the blind? Will they not both fall into a pit? The student is not above the teacher, but everyone who is fully trained will be like their teacher. And what better way to be trained in, you know, how to become, you know, more like Jesus together in your marriage. And I know we come to the marriage knowing some things, but none of us know all of it. And depending on your background and depending on your culture, depending on, you know, socioeconomic, you know, depending on whether you were born in the suburbs and raised or born in the city, it's so different. And I know for Ryan and I, it was huge, huge, huge to have mentors in our life. Some we picked and some who saw what a mess we were and picked us. So very, very, very important.
I love it. I love it. I love it. Well, let me, we're gonna close out here. But let me say just a couple of things. First of all, thank you. I really mean it. It's a very vulnerable place to put yourself out there, sharing your faith, your convictions, and your own personal lives to a host of people that some you've probably not even met. So I want to say thank you for your humility to share with us tonight. I do, and I also want to say thank you for allowing God to use you all in the ways that he has used you. The longevity of your faith, the longevity of your marriage, the longevity of your family and the outcome thus far of your family, it speaks to your ability to persevere and to continue on this journey. But I do want to say that I think it's so important for our fellowship to glean from your insights. God has placed you in this incredible place of honor because you're worthy of it through your faith, but that we need you. And I remember many, many years ago when I wanted to date Ruby, and we started dating, and she was finally going to move from Philadelphia to New England so that we can pursue our dating relationship. And there were a host of people that I needed to talk to here in Philly because Ruby had many relationships. But I remember we packed up everything. It was in the U-Haul, and we had to make one stop. And that stop was to my Jiminy Cricket. And that Jiminy Cricket was Pat Gimple. We had to stop. because Pat took a vested interest in Ruby. She mentored her, she spent time with Ruby, and I had to go over, and I remember going over to just pay tribute, if you will, to Pat, and just as I was taking Ruby out, literally we had the U-Haul truck, and Pat sat there and she nodded, didn't say many words, and I thanked her and let her know I'm going to take care of Ruby. We're going to do great things for God. And as I was about to leave, my Jiminy Cricket, Pat looked at me and said, "I want to say one thing to you, Chip." And I go, "What's that?" She said, "Remember where you are from." And I was like, "What?" Who knew but the prophetess? And I say that, it was 30 years ago. It was crazy. But I say that to say I really respected Ruby's relationships with, she had a host of women. Sandy, Sandy Foster then. I remember we were on a Hope, we were somewhere, I think we were in Manila, and Sandy and I sat next to each other. And I didn't get up to help Sandy get out of the seat in between me because I had some things. And I remember when I saw Ruby later, Ruby said, "Sandy mentioned you weren't really gentlemanlike." And I remember exactly what happened. And I was like, "Dog, okay, I got to up my." Ruby had just older women in her life that were mentoring, shaping her, but also shaping me. And you women have that honor and privilege to continue in that vein for our church. And I want to encourage all our listeners tonight, women in particular, allow the older women to teach the younger women how to love their husbands and their children. You guys, I thank you for allowing God to use you the way he's used you. And you are an incredible source of inspiration. And I thank you for this evening. I would like to tell everyone, thank you. Please, if you do have questions, I'm going to encourage you to contact these women, to contact them via email, via text. I don't know if any of them do Snapchat. Dolores probably does, but contact them via email, contact them via phone, because I want to encourage you to connect and talk with them. They're here for us to help and give us great wisdom through what God has taught them. Amen. I love you, congregation. I want to thank you for tonight. Ladies, you deserve a standing ovation. You were amazing in every way. Thank you.